What happens to your heart when you walk every day? Walking is the most underestimated cardiovascular intervention in existence, and the biological transformation it produces in your heart begins within the very first session. Segment 1. Why walking is not what most people think it is. Walking has an image problem. In a fitness culture that celebrates intensity, that measures worth in sweat volume, training load, and the visible suffering of maximal effort, walking has been consistently positioned as the activity you do when you are not doing something real. The beginner's starting point. The recovery day consolation. The gentle suggestion offered to elderly patients and those for whom genuine exercise is not yet possible. This positioning is not supported by the evidence. It is a cultural perception built by an industry whose business model depends on the belief that fitness requires equipment, membership, instruction, and escalating intensity to produce meaningful results. Walking requires none of these things, and for the specific purpose of cardiovascular health and longevity. It produces outcomes that the research consistently places among the most impactful of any exercise modality available. The human body was designed around walking. For the overwhelming majority of human evolutionary history, sustained bipedal locomotion was the primary physical activity through which every physiological system, cardiovascular, metabolic, musculoskeletal, lymphatic, neurological, was maintained in functional health. The cardiovascular adaptations produced by regular walking are not modest compensations for the absence of more intense exercise. They are the adaptations the cardiovascular system was built to receive, delivered through the movement pattern most deeply aligned with human biological architecture. What happens to the heart when walking becomes a daily practice is not subtle. It is systemic, measurable, and in many cases, clinically significant within weeks of consistent implementation. Segment 2. The cardiac transformation. Walking produces the immediate response. What happens during every walk? Every single walking session initiates a cardiovascular response that, repeated daily, cumulatively reshapes the structure and function of the heart and vascular system over time. The structural cardiac adaptations within weeks of consistent daily walking. Measurable structural changes begin occurring in the heart itself, adaptations that directly improve its efficiency, resilience, and longevity. Stroke volume. The quantity of blood ejected by the left ventricle with each heartbeat increases as the cardiac muscle strengthens and the ventricular chamber adapts to the regular demands of sustained aerobic effort. This increase in stroke volume means the heart achieves the same circulatory output with fewer contractions, which is the mechanistic explanation for the resting heart rate reduction that consistent aerobic exercise reliably produces. Every reduction in resting heart rate represents a reduction in the lifetime mechanical workload of the heart. A heart beating at 60 beats per minute performs approximately 14,000 fewer contractions every 24 hours than a heart beating at 70 beats per minute. Across years and decades, this difference in mechanical demand translates to measurably reduced cardiac aging and significantly extended cardiac functional life. Research consistently documents that lower resting heart rate is one of the strongest independent predictors of cardiovascular longevity available, and regular walking is one of the most accessible natural means of reducing it. The vascular and blood pressure effects. The vascular adaptations produced by daily walking extend beyond the heart itself to the entire arterial network through which the heart's output circulates. Arterial compliance, the flexibility and elasticity of arterial walls that allows them to accommodate the pulsatile flow of each heartbeat without excessive pressure, improves measurably with regular walking through the combined effects of enhanced endothelial nitric oxide production, reduced systemic inflammation, and the direct mechanical conditioning of the arterial wall tissue that sustained blood flow produces. Blood pressure reduction is among the most consistently documented cardiovascular benefits of regular walking across research populations. Meta-analyses examining walking interventions document average reductions in systolic blood pressure of 4 to 8 millimeters of mercury, reductions that, while appearing modest in isolation, translate at the population level to significant reductions in stroke and coronary heart disease event rates. For individuals with elevated blood pressure, regular brisk walking represents a first-line non-pharmacological intervention whose effectiveness is supported by the same quality of evidence as pharmaceutical approaches. The reduction in LDL cholesterol and triglycerides, alongside the increase in HDL cholesterol, produced by regular walking directly addresses the lipid environment most associated with atherosclerotic plaque development, improving the cardiovascular risk profile through the same mechanisms targeted by lipid-lowering pharmaceutical interventions, without their associated costs or side effects. The anti-inflammatory and metabolic effects. Chronic systemic inflammation is the biological environment in which cardiovascular disease develops and progresses, and regular walking is one of the most potent anti-inflammatory interventions available through lifestyle modification. Each walking session produces a transient anti-inflammatory response through the release of myokines, signaling proteins secreted by contracting skeletal muscle that suppress the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and promote the resolution of existing inflammation throughout the body. Repeated daily. This transient anti-inflammatory effect accumulates into a sustained reduction in baseline inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, that directly reduces the inflammatory burden on the vascular endothelium and slows the atherosclerotic progression driven by chronic vascular inflammation. Insulin sensitivity improves with regular walking through the GLUT4 transporter activation mechanism. Skeletal muscle contraction during walking drives insulin-independent glucose uptake into working muscle cells, directly reducing the postprandial blood glucose and insulin elevation that drives the oxidative stress and endothelial glycation most directly responsible for accelerated arterial aging. For individuals with insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, the conditions most strongly associated with accelerated cardiovascular disease, this insulin-sensitizing effect of daily walking addresses the primary metabolic driver of their elevated cardiac risk through the most accessible and sustainable physical activity available. Segment 3, How much, how fast? And when the research on walking and cardiovascular health identifies both the minimum effective dose for meaningful cardiac benefit and the dose-response relationship through which greater consistency and intensity produce proportionally greater outcomes. A daily walk of 30 minutes at a brisk pace, defined as a pace that elevates breathing and produces mild perspiration while still permitting comfortable conversation, produces the full spectrum of cardiovascular adaptations described in the script when maintained consistently across weeks and months. This pace corresponds to approximately 5 to 6 kilometers per hour for most adults and produces a heart rate elevation sufficient to drive the endothelial, structural, and metabolic adaptations underlying cardiovascular improvement. The heart responds to walking the way it responds to every genuine demand placed upon it, by becoming stronger, more efficient, more resilient, and more capable of sustaining the function it is designed to provide across a long and healthy life. Resting heart rate decreases. Blood pressure falls. Arterial flexibility improves. Inflammation retreats. Insulin sensitivity rises. Cholesterol profiles shift in the direction of protection. Stroke volume increases. Cardiac workload decreases. And the cumulative biological age of the cardiovascular system advances more slowly than in the body of someone who does not walk. None of this requires a gym. None of it requires specialized equipment, training knowledge, or a significant time investment beyond 30 minutes of daily movement at a pace your body finds sustainable and your schedule can consistently accommodate. Walking is not the consolation prize of cardiovascular exercise. For the majority of the human population, across the majority of human history, it has been the primary means by which the cardiovascular system maintained the health that modern life has systematically removed by making movement optional. Make it non-negotiable again. Your heart will demonstrate, with the reliability that biology always provides, exactly what consistent daily walking is worth.